Your on-stage moment, your secret sauce, their client reviews, and whether they happen annually, quarterly, or maybe even monthly, you can add and track reviews within the Redtail system. Now, if you've been with Redtail, you know that we preach the importance of clean data. So there are some fields and some things that I would recommend for best practice to make sure that everything is going to function appropriately and those reports are going to be accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and click on a contact here. Let's go ahead and click on Saul Bloom. Let's say that he's a current client of mine. I know that he's due for a review sometime soon, but for some odd reason, that review information isn't showing up in the CRM anywhere. Then what I want to do is click on his record, and to me, the first thing that pops up to me is the next review here. And right now you'll notice there is no date set like the other items here on the summary bar have date set. That's because this is a bad data field. I have Saul as a current client. I know that he's due for a review sometime now, but he has no date there. So what I would suggest to do is make sure that you go to every record and make sure that these reviews are set up appropriately. Now, if I click on edit here, I do want to point out that it says first review here, but in my opinion, it doesn't really help to know the first time we met with Saul was in 1999 of January. In my opinion, it's better to know the last time we met with Saul was this time of year in September. So I'm going to go ahead and use this and suggest that you use this as the last review date and not the first review date. And with that being said, you have to be in the habit of once you have that review, going back here to the review section and changing that last review date to today. So that way it'll push out that next increment for you. But let's go ahead and change this to 2015, assuming, it was sometime last year. And I'm going to put this out here to the 30th. All right. So next thing you want to do is set up that review frequency. Now, assuming this is an advisory client, you're going to have to meet with them at least annually to be in compliance. So I'm going to suggest to at least set this to yearly, and then you're going to have some more options that appear. So this first one says repeats every X amount of years. Now we just talked about being in compliance, you have to meet every year. So I'm going to set this to 1 because I want this to happen every year. And now I can go ahead and say that I want this to happen each September. So that way I don't have every single client review happening in the month of January and bogging our office down. And I would always suggest to check off repeats yearly on, or it might say a different option there depending on the increment that you chose. But I would suggest to select this so that way it does not fall on the weekend. Maybe it's typical practice to meet with Saul at the end of the month. So I can say, I want it to be the last Friday or the last Thursday, something like that. But this will assure that it doesn't fall on the weekend and slip through the cracks. And I could go ahead and set that repeat ends to never and update that client review. But this know your client section here, the client review area, this is the first place that I want you to set up for good, clean data. Now you can search on the first review date or next review date fields. So feel free to do an is empty search and pull up all of those clients that are missing and a review date. And you could even push all of that to an Excel sheet using a custom export. So you can go in and put in dates that are scattered throughout the year and send that back to us, and we'll import that back into your system. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later at the end, but I do want to let you know that there is an option so you don't have to go record by record to make sure this information is set. But also, as a best practice, what I can recommend is to start this today and take the next year to make sure that you have every date set out and scattered. So if I make sure that starting today, I set the dates, when clients come in, I set the frequency, then within a year's time, assuming everyone comes in once a year, you're going to have all of that information entered. So now that you have that client review section set, some more review related fields that I would suggest to set up so that it has that clean data philosophy that we're talking about would be things like your activity and note categories and maybe a user defined field. So if I click on my name in the top right hand corner and I go to the manage your account section, I'm going to go to manage database list so I can set up these lists. I can edit, add, or alter them. But I would suggest to add in an activity type that says client review. So that way you can color coordinate to make all of your client reviews in a nice red color. And then I would also customize your categories so that way you can say, at the end of the year, pull me up all of my client meeting notes for 2016 or all my client meeting notes for just Saul. If you have things like these categories and activity types in here related to your functions like reviews, then you're going to be able to color coordinate it using the activity types, but also pull up things later using the reports or the searches. So I would suggest to customize something like that. And then if I click on user defined fields, these are those individual answers where every single person might have a different response. And maybe it's typical practice for me when a client comes in for a review, I make sure that I have their favorite cookie available. If it's Snickerdoodle, I have that available. I have their drink preference there on the table for them. So things like this, if you have items like this where you want to make sure you have it available to recall when you're in the moment, then you're going to want to make sure you add that in as a user-defined field. So when that review time comes, you could refer to that client's user-defined fields and see, okay, they love Diet Coke. I'm going to make sure that is on the table and ready. So those are some review-related fields that I would suggest to set up for clean data. And now that that's all set up, you can go ahead and use the client reviews in the system. You have two different ways you can use reviews. They're meant to be a review reminder in the system. So when I set that frequency for Saul, it doesn't mean that Saul is coming in on the 30th of 2016. It just means that Saul is due for a review around the 30th of 2016. So it's going to pop up as a reminder for me. So then I can take that reminder and make it into an activity so I can schedule that time and date and put it on my calendar and make sure that I know and everyone in the office knows that Saul is coming in. So for that, since it is a reminder, the very first place you're going to find it is here on your overview if you click on your reminders box. And this reminder section is going to be aggregated, so it's going to have your marital review, your marital anniversaries, your client anniversaries, your reviews, your birthdays, all of that in one place. So if you do want to isolate this list by only reviews, you can filter it to show only client reviews. And depending on your preferences, and what I mean by that is if I click my name in the top right, and I'm going to open up preferences in the top right, every single person needs to go in and adjust their preferences because mine can be different than yours. It's based on username. But if I go down here to the reminders, you'll notice that my client review reminders are set to 60 days in advance and 7 days past due. And I always recommend to set this to some increment of past due in case you get really busy 1 week or 1 month and you don't check it. You're not going to have those slip through the cracks. Because what's important to remember with reviews is it's just meant to be a review reminder. So once that date comes and passes, it shoots over to the next date. So if I don't have this set to some sort of increment past due and that date passes, it's going to slip through the cracks. So set this to something like 30. So in case the month gets busy, you'll have those there. And based on this increment set in your preferences is what will show up here in your reminders. So before it was only 7 days past due. So Mary was due for a review 2 days ago. I need to make sure that I do schedule that with her. Now, in addition to that reminder section, you do have your calendar that is going to house this information as well. I'm going to uncheck the names here so it shows everyone's calendar. And as long as you click on actions and you have it set to show client reviews, then you're going to have your client reviews appear here on the calendar. Now, our reviews are here in this pink kind of red color. So depending on the color preference you pick, that's what your reminder is going to look like, just like the birthdays. And like I said, it doesn't mean that Mary was coming in for a review on the 20th. It just meant that Mary is due for a review around this time. So I still need to go into Mary's record once I do see this review reminder. And I suggest to add in an activity once you're on the phone with Mary, so that way you can schedule that time and date and say that Mary's coming in next week or whatever it is, and make sure that it's scheduled and on the calendar. Now, that is a great way to work with reviews, and if it works for you, then definitely keep doing it. But what I find is that, sometimes things get busy and things slip through the cracks, or sometimes people reschedule over and over again, or I don't want to have to rely on my team having to see the reminder and schedule it. So what I personally suggest to do is to work out of the reminder report. If you go to reports on the left-hand side, you can select on reminder reports and you can select on client reviews. And this is pulling from your preferences as well. So I didn't save the preferences yet. So it still is 7 days past due and 60 in advance. But these filters on the right are really going to help. So maybe you only want to see your clients that are due for review. You can isolate this list by servicing advisor by selecting on your name, applying on that filter, and you'll see you only have one client. So what I would suggest to do as a best practice is to run, run this client review reminder report for yourself using the appropriate segmentation here, using the filters on the right. And then from here, I would set this to 0 days past due and 365 days in advance and apply that filter. So that way I can get all of my clients that are due for review in the next year in one list. And I would personally suggest to export this list to Excel. So that way from within the Excel document, you can go in and highlight. I would create color coordination here. You could create green for scheduled, yellow for rescheduled, and red for canceled. And if you know that you scheduled a review with Charlie already, then you can go ahead and highlight this field as I'm sorry, not red, but it would be something like green. So that way you know that they're taken care of and off of the list. But that's something that I would suggest to do. So that way you're picking out your clients, your list for the next year. You could work out of the Excel document, you could apply that color coordination, but then as soon as you meet with Charlie, go back into the CRM and adjust that review section either by clicking on Know Your Client and Edit, or clicking on the actual next review date and setting this last review date to today or whatever it is. So that way it'll shoot out the next date and your next year's report would be accurate. So personally for me, I like colors. I like to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. I like to make sure that I'm working with only my group. So I personally would work out of that report, isolate that list, push it to the next year, and then push it to Excel. And then once I see that they're due for review, I would use the CRM to schedule the review still using an activity. So that way I can, tier these out as client reviews and pull up everything that had to do with the client meeting later. And then I would adjust the client review frequency or the last review date to today or whatever it was, so it would make my next year's report accurate. So with the system, it is meant to be that review reminder, so it's not meant to be the time and date that the client comes in. And once that time and date passes, it is off your calendar unless your preferences are set to show that increment of days past due. So because of that reason, I do suggest to use that report, but it's completely up to you. If you do choose to use that report, just make yourself an annual activity that repeats on a yearly basis that says run client review report. And you can have that clean data as long as you're following this process each year. Now remember, if you do want to pull up all of your contacts that are missing a review date, or maybe they have to be, you want to pull up everyone that has a certain review month, like December, or a certain review year, like 2013, you could always do that. If you go to Contacts on the left and you click on the Advanced Search tab here at the top, you can go ahead and select on Personal Profile for the type. And then for field, you either have next review date, you have next review month, or you have next review year. So maybe I want to pull up everyone that's missing their next review date. Then I can set this operand to is empty, run this search, and I know we're preaching the importance of clean data. We have a lot of records in here missing a review date, but you'll notice some of these are businesses. So I can isolate this list further by selecting and selecting contact for the contact level data and selecting status to set this equal to active. So that way I'm not pulling up those businesses, those spouses, those children. I'm just pulling up those active clients that I serve. And then from this, you could segment it down even further. Maybe I only want to see my clients that are set to me as the servicing advisor. Then I can go ahead and isolate this further as well. So feel free to use the search option to pull up this information as well. And I also want to point out, if you click on your name and you go to manage your account and you click on, oops, excuse me, I got click happy there. If you click on custom export templates and you click new in the top right hand corner, this will give you all of the fields in Redtail. So maybe you wanted to do a review date cleanup. You could go ahead and check off, first and last name so that you know who you're dealing with. But then you can do a Control F and type in review, and it'll take you to the fields that we have that you can select for review, and you can check those off And even if you have some user-defined fields that you think would apply, you can check those off as well and save this. And you could order it, if you want to see last name first, you could move that up. But what this would allow you to do is apply this Excel report to those contacts missing a review and that review information. So that way you don't have to go record by record, click edit, type in everything, click save, go to the next one, click edit, go to the next one. All you have to do is run or make this template first, then run that search again for those contacts that are missing their review information. So we'll go to personal profile. We'll do next review is empty. We'll run this search, and I'm going to just isolate this down further to only my contacts for this example. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm pulling up all of the contacts in my system that are missing a review date and are my clients. So that way I can get them all in this Excel or in this search page, select them all, go over to the contact options to select on custom exports and select on that one that I just created. So I named that one review date cleanup. And I can run this export and pull this up. And what I could do now is type in the dates, send it back to us at Redtail, and then we'll update your fields. So that way, when you log into your system, you're going to have these fields in there already because you typed it in, saved it, sent it back to us, and you didn't change this number from being attached to bill, because that's how we know we're going to put this review date into this record is through this number. So I always like to point out that you do have that custom export that is a great way to clean up data so you don't have to go record by record. You could just work out of the Excel, send it back to us, and you're good to go. Now, the last thing that I want to remind you of for reviews is we talked about reviews being your onstage moment, your secret sauce. So you might consider creating a workflow to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks through this process. Everyone knows exactly what they have to do. And if client A talks to client B, they can say they had the same experience. So if you are interested in that, I would suggest to click on the question mark in the top right-hand corner and open up our Redtail help desk. So you can select on the tile here that says training sessions. And I would shoot all the way to the bottom and click on Wonderful World of Workflows, because this will go head to toe on that building process, because oftentimes these reviews are kind of like your secret sauce or your proprietary process. So we suggest this process called whiteboarding, where you sit down with the entire team, all the key players, and you think about your process, and then you could build it into the CRM and apply it to your contacts and use it with automations and whatnot. But most importantly, if you go down here to the bottom, we do have some templates, some sample templates available for you. And I think here on the last page, we do have a client review workflow that you can refer to. So when we have a review, we prepare for the review, we have the review, and we follow up for the review. And these are all of the to-do items that need to be completed at each stage. And depending on what happens, we can go to different places. So client reviews are really special. It's your on-stage moment. It's your time to shine. So make sure that you have the information clean inside the system. You're using either reports or reminders to see it, and then use activities to schedule it. And then from there, you can complement your process with things like workflows to make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. But otherwise, that is the suggested process for client reviews. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our team at 1-800-206-5030, option 3 for support, and we're more than happy to help. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.